this is Robert A. Wood, Deputy U.S. Ambassador to the UN, who voted no on a resolution calling for the immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza that everyone else supported. Additionally, the fact that he was fiddling with his phone while Palestinian diplomat was speaking speaks volumes, showing his disregard for human lives and peace. To be fair, he has just relayed decisions from Biden and Blinken. However, he could have resigned instead of opposing the world and backing war. This whole situation is a mess, revealing that Israel and the military-industrial complex have more control over U.S. politicians than its citizens. So that's who he is. So there was a vote recently that was done in the UN General Assembly that was really just in a sense, sentencing more innocent Palestinians to death by way of raising a hand. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. We're going to take a look at this from one of the diplomatic representatives in the UN. We're going to hear what he has to say, and then we will talk about it on the other side. Katie.
We do not support calls for an immediate ceasefire. This would only plant the seeds for the next war, because Hamas has no desire to see a durable peace, to see a two-state solution. We do.
What are your thoughts on that, Cam, especially about his claims that Hamas wouldn't obey a ceasefire or agree to a ceasefire, or they would violate one?
So I'm not a huge expert on this, but from what I was able to absorb throughout this whole conflict, my memory serves me. I mean, back in 2002, Hamas agreed on a two-state solution, right? Or around that time, they had no opposition to it at that time. Even in their charter that was updated in 2017, doesn't even call for the elimination of Jewish people. I don't think Hamas is adverse to peace the way that the U.S. is sort of gaslighting us to believe. And I also like to point out it's quite disgusting and despicable how this administration has used two Black people or people of color to basically be the face of continuing genocide. It's quite gross.
Of course. So let me share this, because this was really despicable by the representative of the United States. This gentleman decided to do this during the speech. So the representative of the United States in the United Nations, he is up here on the upper right-hand corner. As the representative from Palestine is speaking, I want you to focus on what the representative of the United States is suddenly doing. So take a look.
I now resume my role as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, this is the moment of truth. This is a turning point in history, and it is beyond regrettable. It is disastrous that the Security Council was again prevented from rising to this moment.
Speaking of rising to this moment, the United States representative decided to start playing on his phone while the representative for Palestine is speaking.
I mean, it makes it easier to sort of make that decision and raise your hand like that if you just not listen to what's being said. You you gotta. I question the hearts and souls of these people when they get into these positions. I really do. I try to believe a lot of people are inherently good, but when it comes to this stuff, there's gotta be something wrong.
Yeah. Let's continue to hear what the representative of Palestine said, and we're listening to what he says versus the representative of the United States has said. So let's continue.
To this moment to uphold its clear responsibilities in the face of this grave crisis, threatening human lives and threatening regional and international peace and security.
So that was the representative of Palestine that was speaking, and he was being ignored rudely by the U.S. representative. And so just shout out to Richard Medhurst for sharing that. And I know Richard Medhurst was actually on Danny Jaybefaunt earlier. I didn't get to watch it because I was doing some channel and editing work, but I'll try to catch it later. But shout out to Richard Medhurst for that. And so the ultimate, for what I observe, is the horrible act of basically just condemning an entire population to more shelling in Gaza was this moment here that I'll be sharing right now. So here we go.
En contra.
Against.
I want you to observe there's the United Kingdom, the US, Albania, Brazil, China. Their hands are down. There's only one hand up.
Yeah, I've never seen a black person do the sick howl salute before, but I mean, it's I mean, 2023, anything could happen at this point.
Yep. Didn't have this on my bingo card. Let's continue.
Abstenciones.
Abstentions.
The UK abstained. So they didn't vote.
We're heartless, but it's not as heartless. It's just, yeah.
El resultado de la votación.
The result of the vote is as follows: 13 votes in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention.
El proyecto de.
The draft resolution has not been approved due to the veto of a permanent member of the Security Council.
So basically meaning a stop for a ceasefire. I'm sorry, a vote for a ceasefire would mean that Israel would need to stop shelling and basically murdering Palestinians. But because the United States has veto power, their one vote overturned 13 other votes.
That makes zero sense to me. So I don't know how the Security Council is like formulated, if it's like if they switch around or something like that, or if those are like permanent members. But like, what if the US was out here actually directly invading, let's say, all of South America? Well, what if we just invaded all of South America and the Security Council votes, hey, you should probably not do that? If the US is there, could the US veto like themselves from being like admonished? That I don't understand what that purpose, the purpose of having that veto power is. Who does that help, having that?
It is permanently just in the United States. So basically, for me, it feels like the UN is a vassal for the United States. It's basically a tool for the United States to say, Well, we have it's a power move over the world, because if the UN votes by a majority to do a particular thing in the world, if the United States doesn't want it done, then it doesn't get done. So and the United States uses this veto power, especially when it comes to either itself committing atrocities or its allies committing atrocities. And if all the other member states want to vote against it, but then if the United States says no, everybody has to go with what the United States says. And really, there really is no power against the United States. So my question is there any type of worldwide democracy in regards to the United Nations?
I wouldn't think so, since the whole world wants an actual ceasefire, and it turns out one singular vote it can get in the way of that is baffling. I don't even understand. It boggles my mind how that is accepted as like, oh yeah, this is common practice. Yeah, this is how it works. Oh, we can't change it. Like, what?
Yeah, it is ridiculous. So here's an article out of the Associated Press that says U.S. vetoes UN resolution backed by many nations demanding immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Jeez Louise. It says United States vetoed a United Nations resolution Friday, backed by almost all other Security Council members and dozens of other nations demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Supporters called it a terrible day and warned of more civilian deaths and destruction as the war goes into its third month. The vote in the 15-member council was 13-1, with the United Kingdom abstaining. The United States' isolated stance reflecting a growth of fracture between Washington and some of its closest allies over Israel's months-long bombardment in Gaza. France and Japan were among those supporting the call for a ceasefire. Interesting. It says in a vain effort to press Biden administration to drop its opposition to calling for a halt for fighting, the foreign ministers of Egypt, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey were all in Washington on Friday. That was yesterday. But their meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken took place only after the UN vote. Along with the vote, the Arab diplomats' mission served to shift responsibility more squarely onto the United States for protecting Israel from growing demands to stop the airstrikes that are killing thousands of Palestinian civilians. So even Russia, Dmitry Pawlowski said, this is one of the most darkest days in the history of the Middle East. Says the death sentence to thousands, if not tens of thousands, and more civilians in Palestine and Israel, including women and children. So
yeah, man, I it's everything about what goes on, especially with this conflict. It's extremely disheartening. I can't count how many times I would just randomly like cry throughout the week just thinking about all of this and how nobody with the power to stop it is doing anything to stop it. Like,
yeah.
No.
Let me ask you this. Say hypothetically they do stop Hamas. Is that going to be the end of a militant group within Gaza?
No. Like history, CIA's term blowback is literally like destroying these people's lives will not destroy militant opposition to it. It'll be another group that will be deemed a terrorist that at some point, if we just let everything run amok, like maybe we'll see people start just nuking populations and they say, oh, there's a bunch of terrorists there.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that I wanted to bring out was this particular video. A Palestinian was interviewed on television, And I want you guys to read what they say is translated into English. So let me share this with you guys. And yeah, let's go.
مش كمان حابة تحكي؟
حابة أوصل كمان رسالتي لنتنياهو لإسرائيل كمان. بحب أوصل لنتنياهو هاي الرسالة. نتنياهو أنت وعدوينك طبعا. هذه الرسالة مش لإله لحاله، إله هو وعدوينه اللي هم عدوينه اللي هم الإسرائيل الصهيوني. طبعا بحب أوصل رسالتي لهم مش رح نستسلم.
Little boy says, of course, I want to send my message to them. This is to Netanyahu and his allies, that we will not surrender to you. This little boy has to be no more than 7 or 8 years old.
That's some revolutionary spirit in that boy right there.
Mm-hmm. He has more to say. He says, you are going to surrender to us. And I love when he says this, and there is going to come a day when we're going to teach you politeness. Wow.
نعلمكم في الأدب. يعني هاي اللي بقدر أحكيه، بس لأنه هان صارت الناس، يعني هان صارت تجيب قزايز مية، الجار يروح على الجار يقول له بالله في عندك ازازتين مية ندبر حنا. مش إلهم، مش للكبار، إلنا إحنا يعني أطفال غزة تعبنا متنا، بدنا هدنة، بدنا وقف إطلاق نار، بدنا نروع بيوتنا. إحنا حنضلنا صامدين وحنرجع لأرضنا حتى لو ما رضيتوش. حنرجع لأرضنا ونرجع نقعد فوق.
He says we're going to return to our land and sleep on top of the rubble and eat on top of the rubble.
I feel like you would never hear, if you ask that to an Israeli, no, I don't think they would. I don't think they'd have that same enthusiasm.
Yeah.
الردم، ننام فوق الردم، ناكل فوق الردم.
شو صار ببيتكم؟ بيتكم انقصف ولا أموره تمام؟
لا انقصف. احنا شمال غزة أبراج الندى، الشمال كله يعني انهدم.
So his home was bombed and his home is no longer standing. And so when people say that they're trying to destroy Hamas, it's like, okay, all right. But now you're creating more militants right now. And so that young little person will eventually grow up to fight the occupation.
Yep.
Maybe it's just me, but I know the answer to how to prevent that little person from becoming a militant. You want to hear?
Yeah, sure. Lay it on me.
You end the siege on Gaza, you end the illegal occupation, and you end the apartheid. That's how you turn that little person from being a militant to wanting to be, let's say, a doctor or a journalist.
Mm-hmm. Like if you take away their enemy to fight, then why would they fight? There's no one to fight then.
Yeah. Because the thing is, like, if you're fighting for your home, then what? So the thing is that you got to remember, these little kids are literally seeing the carnage themselves. I couldn't imagine the things that I've seen on the ground. I couldn't have imagined seeing at that age. Imagine being 11, 12 years old, having to help carry a dead body. It's just horrible. And so the very least that they could have done was say, you know what? Yeah, we want to vote for a ceasefire.
And wasn't a stipulation a part of that is a release of hostages as well?
I think so. In fact, let me share what actually Dr. Cornel West actually spoke on this as well. He says the U.S. veto at the UN to block a vote to end Israel's barbaric genocidal campaign in Gaza is an act of spiritual obscenity and moral bankruptcy. We must fight to cast light on the precious Palestinian children and innocent women and men being slaughtered by Israeli forces, enabled by the U.S. government. We must have an immediate ceasefire, end of the siege, and end the vicious Israeli apartheid. So he's talking about this.
Oh my God! Just when you scroll down, the first thing you see is those Israeli flags. My Twitter has been full of Israeli flags and Ukrainian flag wearers that are just pumping out that Hasbara like it's like they're rabbits making babies. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. The funny part is this says completely dishonest message. No, it's not. He says if you actually cared about civilian life, you would call on Hamas to immediately surrender and release hostages. If they release the hostages, which they have been doing, then they have been releasing the hostages. Asking them to surrender basically means you're asking them to relinquish their legal right by international law to resist illegal occupation. So that's what you're doing. And this person says, so the people of Gaza and Israel can start working towards long-term peace. Netanyahu even stipulated that his goal is to take over the land of Gaza so that no Palestinian can ever return. That's the goal. If that's the goal, then the goal was never peace. And in fact, I would tell this person to actually listen to exactly what Netanyahu says, because his goal was never peace in the first place. And as you brought out earlier, and what happened, that the militant groups actually were looking towards a two-state solution, were looking to the ending of apartheid so that they can still coexist with Israel. But Israel did not want that. And so they actually, especially in the March of Return, they were actually going to the fence, going to the gates, to advocate peacefully for them to return to their homes. And Israeli snipers were shooting at their legs, shooting them in the head so that they could not even protest. And they were doing it peacefully.
Yep. BDS is a peaceful means of resistance that has been demonized and made illegal in states here. The people who are behind Israel do not want peace. They don't want it. They don't believe in it.
Yeah. So just to get a good identification out of the representative that followed the rules of his handlers. So Simon Godek says, this is Robert A. Wood, Deputy U.S. Ambassador to the UN, who voted no on a resolution calling for the immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza that everyone else supported. Additionally, the fact that he was fiddling with his phone while Palestinian diplomat was speaking speaks volumes, showing his disregard for human lives and peace. To be fair, he has just relayed decisions from Biden and Blinken. However, he could have resigned instead of opposing the world and backing war. This whole situation is a mess, revealing that Israel and the military-industrial complex have more control over U.S. politicians than its citizens. So that's who he is. So there's something that I wanted to read. And I saw this and it smacked me in the face. I'm going to read this, and I told them that I was going to read this thread, not the entire thread, but it is a doozy. I'm not sure if you saw this, but what's going on in Palestine right now against the Palestinian people, it could be regarded as another Holocaust. And it's not me saying it. It's a Jewish person saying it.
Mm.
So this is from Chronic Dyke. That's the name of the person who posted this. And this person is Jewish. They say, after reflecting on it a bit, I realized that my and other white Jews' gut discomfort with comparing Netanyahu to Hitler isn't about technicalities or anti-Semitism, but is rooted in white supremacy. The Holocaust was terrible, but in most ways, it wasn't unique. The Holocaust is unique in being taken seriously as a genocide on a retroactively white people by white people. I don't feel comfortable addressing the issue of Jews' historical race, but white supremacy has a dominating role in how we talk about the Holocaust. The discussion of Holocaust is A, unique, B, the result of an evil man, C, a genocide of 6 million helpless Jews, is all a plot to feed an idea of Holocaust exceptionalism. The Holocaust sticks out as something that happened in the imperial core, but isn't unique in that regard. See settler colonial countries. It sticks out as mass violence of whites on retroactively white people, but probably isn't unique there either. The numbers of the Holocaust are extreme, but the discussion of the Holocaust as 6 million Jews is widely unhelpful to any revolutionary because horrifying, context-less figures are useless. We should be discussing A, the other people who were targeted in the Holocaust and why, and B, what 6 million actually means, roughly 2/3 of European Jewish population and more than half of the global Jewish population. We should be talking about the Holocaust in a way that focuses on the future and action, on action and preventing and struggle. And we should be talking about the Holocaust in connection with capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism. Did you want to react so far?
All I can say is that, yeah, the number has been a big talking point of people denying this current Holocaust. They like to point at the Palestinian population is not dwindling in the millions the same way it could be compared to the Holocaust of the Jews, but what this person is talking about is actually looking at what is in practice to be compared, and not just the magnitude of death. I think she's right on.
Yeah. Because we cannot forget about the other people that were killed in the Holocaust that were not Jewish. If you look at the history of what happened during the Holocaust, the first people that they actually came for were communists.
Mm-hmm.
Communists were the first to go. It was the trades workers as well. A lot of the people who were involved in that. They also went after the gays. If you look at the gay people a lot of the gay people, who were not Jewish at all. They wore the pink triangle. Then you also had the people who may have been transgender. Then you also have the people who were Jehovah's Witnesses. They also had the purple triangle. So they were also specially targeted as well because Jehovah's Witnesses opposed the Nazi Party, which I am a former Jehovah's Witness, so I know. I read the history. And so there were many different groups that were also included, that were including German people who were of German nationality that were also murdered during the Holocaust. So when we talk about the Holocaust in its entirety, it wasn't just against the Jews, but the Jews were targeted principally as well. So I think that's also an important piece. So it says, instead, Hitler is made into a persona of evil, and the Holocaust is made into this one-off historical event. It's now somewhere between rhetorical device and a cultural touchstone. And in this way, anyone who makes a comparison to Hitler is seen as anti-Semitic. The Holocaust just has to be the worst event in history, and Hitler has to be the worst human possible. Otherwise, we accept that it could and does and is and will happen again. We have to recognize that this awful, awful event has lots of company in history. And remember what you and I talked about what happened in Congo under King Leopold II, right? That also was a Holocaust. Cam, if you want to respond.
No, I got nothing else to add to that. It was a Holocaust.
We recognize that the unique aspects of the Holocaust, but its overall character is far from it. And in recognizing that, we see that more clearly what was lost from Jewish people. No longer do we, white Jews, have to hold it up as a rhetorical device or a talisman. We can recognize that the vast majority of human stories and richness of culture that was developed was extinguished to a devastating degree, and find common cause with others who have faced this. We are not unique, and so we are not alone. And if instead we stick to the Holocaust as unique myth, we can pretend that violence towards others isn't as bad as what happened to us. That is an easy shortcut to thinking that Israel is justified in doing what it's doing, which it never has been and never will be. It says, not only must never again be never again for anyone, but it must be, this has already happened again. In many forms, fascist and or capitalist imperialist violence is an everyday and global occurrence. We have to pivot to not anymore.
Agreed.
So I confidently say that Netanyahu is just as bad as Hitler. Two charismatic fascists who use convoluted ideology as justification in order to the massacre and mass oppression of an entire people. Two awful human beings with military resources and large followings. Because if we step back from the mythology of Holocaust uniqueness, we can see that it is not about numbers. It's about ideology, history, culture, fascism, colonialism, imperialism, capitalism. We owe it to history, to each other, and to Palestine to act accordingly.
It falls in line with the same type of mentality that white people would be in. And I don't want to sound like I'm an anti-white person or anything, but white people tend to be able to. It's their inability to decenter themselves in conversations and talks of historical events, and it's also they have a tendency to view. To try to make a unique victimhood type I don't know. They like to take up victimhood where they can find it. Like they have to search for victimhood to be a part of, and that's just it's it's a part of white supremacy. My stuff matters when I'm hurt. That matters. Anytime anything outside of that, though, it's like, oh, y'all good, I'm good, so y'all good, and that's the problem.
Yeah. For instance, what happened, and a lot of what happened in Indonesia and in Malaysia, and all these different massacres that were overseen by people like Henry Kissinger. There were millions that were killed, and those were also Holocausts as well.
Yeah. And he got to live to be 100 years old and is revered by the media.
Yeah, definitely. And so my thing is that it's not downplaying or minimizing the atrocities of what happened to the Holocaust. in the 1930s to the 1940s in Germany and in Europe. It's not minimizing it, but it's taking the other Holocausts that have happened and elevating those to the same level as what happened in Europe and in Germany, because those are just as atrocious and just as horrible as what happened to the 6 million Jews and others, as well as people who are LGBTQ, Jehovah's Witnesses, disabled, and the like.
Yeah.
So it's saying those atrocities matter too. Kind of like when we say Black Lives Matter, those Holocausts also matter. That's what we're saying. And we also need to take those and put those at the same level, at the same importance as what happened to largely the Jewish people in the Holocaust in the 1930s and 40s.
Yeah.